We have to learn how to balance exploration and execution for wherever we face uncertainty. And that's the fundamental difference that I think people have to think about going forward, is how do we learn how to do exploration work, and how do we learn how to balance that exploration work with the execution work.
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Our guest today is Brant Cooper, New York Times bestselling author of The Lean Entrepreneur and CEO of Moves the Needle, a company which helps entrepreneurs and startups thrive in the highly digitalized 21st century. Digitalization and digital transformation are mainstay topics here on our podcast, but we never really delve into the differences between them and the potential pitfalls of equating the two. And so in today's episode, Brant is going to lend us his rich expertise and help us dispel this super common DT myth. And welcome, Brant. It's really great to have you on the show today. Anything you want to add, or should we just move to the questions?
We should jump right in, but thanks so much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really great one. And let's start with a hard hitter right away. A big trend that we've been seeing recently is this digitalization. So companies digitalizing their processes, or maybe launching websites and apps for the first time in the case of traditional businesses. And they're calling this digital transformation. But does this really do justice to DT? Is digital transformation really just about adopting new technologies, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, so I think it's fine. I think that all of that digitization work that those companies are doing has to be done. Mm-hmm. I think that they're just maybe not recognizing that there's something larger going on that's driving that need. And it's not just that everything is becoming digital. That's sort of a simplistic and shallow way of looking at what's going on in the world. In my view, we are undergoing a fundamental change from a society that's been organized by the industrial age, literally organized by assembly line, by the management science, Taylor's, management science, and, Henry Ford's sort of perfect example of what a business should look like, optimized for producing a Model T in any color you want, as long as it's black. That was the optimal organization. And what we're moving from that ethos, from that society shaped by the assembly line, into a digital world, hyper connected, more like a meshed network. Information and even misinformation, somebody pointed out to me, moving at the speed of light. It's a more complex world. It's more interconnected. And what it means, in my view, is that all of society now is going to change how it's structured, how it's managed, how it works to reflect the digital age. And so digital transformation is certainly part of that. But if you don't see the larger picture, if you don't see the real revolution that's going on, and you try to manage your company inside this digital age based upon the principles of the assembly line, it doesn't really matter what you digitize in your company, you will fail.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's basically these residual things from a totally different era, and work is such an important part of our lives. It makes perfect sense that the world should change because of new approaches to work, because of stuff like that. So let me get this straight. So digital transformation is actually an all-round business and societal transformation, and this digitization is just one necessary part of it.
Right. So one might say, if one wants to keep the digital transformation part, defining, digitizing products and services and back end, that's fine. But it's a subset of this digital revolution, which is a fundamental change to society and requires then a different mindset. And so this is the key thing that I think is missing in those that focus only on the digitization, the digital transformation, is that they're not seeing that there's a new mindset that's required to live in this and work in this digital world. And so what is that called? I don't know. But it all needs to be happening at the same time, or all of the work digitizing, the digital transformation side of it, again, will not have the impact that people are hoping it will.
Yeah, because the impact is not so much as in the adoption of digital, but in the shift in the mindset, as you correctly pointed out. Yeah.
Right. It's the shifting mindset, which again, it's all across society. So it's a shifting mindsets required in education. It's required in government. It's required in small businesses, startups, large corporations, NGOs. All of these are going to change. And so those that get it and change first will actually, that's their competitive advantage. They'll be way out in front. And of course, that means that things will change on the worker side and things are changing on the consumer side. And so again, if you don't do the change inside the business, then you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, those are some very good points. Yeah. Okay, maybe can we take a look at this distinction between digitalization as kind of a subset and digital transformation as this kind of all large scale and longer lasting process? What would be some practical indicators of this difference? I mean, okay, I know that we pointed out now businesses just adopting digital processes and digital technologies without actually making the change in mindset, the change in structure. Are there any other practical examples? Like what have you been seeing with people that you've worked with who are having problems with this maybe?
Well, I think it's the continuous uncertainty. And so I think that uncertainty is really the key characteristic that faces our everyday life. And so I think that the pandemic really drove that home, right? Mm-hmm. Suddenly, all of the things that we were doing don't work anymore, or we can't do them anymore. And so, leaders had to ask themselves the question, well, what do we do? Well, I mean, that's uncertainty. We don't know what to do in the face of this global pandemic. So some make the mistake of thinking that the pandemic is the cause of the uncertainty. And my argument is that it's just the latest cause. In other words, the increased complexity and the interconnectedness of the world means that we're going to be facing continuous disruptions. And what's extraordinary here in the US is if we just look about the last year, pandemic, Black Lives Matter protest, energy grid failing in Texas that causes, hardship for millions and millions of people. A ship gets stuck in a canal that upsets global supply chains, an insurrection. I mean, these are all like potentially once in a lifetime type of disruptions, and they happened in the last year. And so I think that the broader point is that we are living in a world where we're going to see endless disruptions. And if we see endless disruptions and all of this complexity, it means that uncertainty is the new norm. And so, I hear people talking about and leaders saying like, oh, well, I just can't wait until, things get back to normal. Right. And this is like the biggest mistake that leaders can make. There is no getting back to normal. This is the new normal. Uncertainty is the new normal. And so if that's the case, then we have to look forward and say, what does that mean for our business? What does that mean for how we organize people, how we organize work, how we measure progress? All of these things change because now uncertainty is deeply embedded into our normal lives. And so before, we all had very much an execution mindset. And execution mindset meant that we know what we have to do. And so we have to increase the efficiency of knowing what we have to do, of the work that is known that we have to do. And so we optimize that efficiency and we, sort of squeeze harder and push our people harder and increase productivity and lower input costs. And it's all around increasing the efficiency of execution work. But now that we face uncertainty all across the business, from the core business to quote unquote, innovation down the road, we face some level of uncertainty. It means that then we have to not just execute. We have to be in this exploration mode. We have to be in learning mode. We have to learn how to balance exploration and execution for wherever we face uncertainty. And that's the fundamental difference that I think people have to think about going forward, is how do we learn how to do exploration work, and how do we learn how to balance that exploration work with the execution work. And so, all of the work that these businesses have been doing over the years around human-centered design and agile principles and rapid experimentation, these are all clues. These are all part of this exploration work, but we still don't know how to scale it, and we still don't know how to organize it on a large, in a large form factor. And there's all sorts of other purposeful things that one must do inside their organization to make that new reality work, this balancing between exploration and execution. And so there's a lot of work to be done in order for these businesses to be able to survive and thrive in an era marked by uncertainty.
Yeah, I think you really hit the mark there. I think certainty is definitely the great kind of differentiator. And as you pointed out, all of these like concepts like agile, like being future ready, creating stuff that is future proof, these all kind of fall into this mindset of, okay, we can't eliminate uncertainty, but the best way we can do is embrace it and incorporate it into our strategizing and our planning. And I think another really good point by you was how we have to balance the exploration phase with the execution phase, because I think it's not that hard to make the transition from execution to exploration, but knowing that you have to keep the two and knowing that you have to keep both of them in a good balance is, I think this will be one of the next big challenges for DT to overcome, to kind of transition to the next phase.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think that the innovation industry and even the digital transformation industry pretends that there's an execution side of the house and an exploration side of the house. And that's wrong. The execution side of the house faces uncertainty, therefore they must also explore. They explore less, but wherever there's uncertainty, they have to learn how to explore. And so this arbitrary splitting of the company into execution and exploration side is wrong. And I think that the digital transformation, unfortunately, often falls into that, because a lot of the digital transformation stuff has come out of the innovation industry, and it's too focused on technology and again, sort of not the mindset as we talked about before.
Yeah, definitely. This is already a nice transition into my next question, because we're already kind of talking about these organizational things and about, I mean, it's just a no-brainer, right? If the execution is separate from the exploration, this on the organizational level, this translates to organizational silos. And you can't have effective digital transformation if your teams are siloed, if they're not working together, if they're not collaborating, if they're not all on the same page. And yeah, this is what my next question is about. So how can we, or how should companies balance the role of people and the role of technology in order to achieve this large-scale digital transformation? Or maybe even how should society do this?
Yeah, so I think that we have to, there's a deeper philosophical answer to this that I'm exploring, but I think I'll save that for another day as my thoughts coalesce around it. But I think that our approach to technology is part of the problem, and sort of our belief that the technology itself inherently has all of these, properties that will change things for the good. And I think that that's wrong. I mean, I think that the technology itself, often is zeros and ones, or it's technology that has extraordinary power, but in the end, it's up to the human beings using that power to address real needs. And so there's this humanistic part of technology that we tend to ignore. And I think it's not a coincidence that human-centered design and design thinking and those practices, and even the empowerment of agile, is coming to the forefront at the same time, because there's some sort of recognition that we need the humanistic part as well as the technology part. So I think that organizationally, what that means is that the more uncertainty you face, the more cross-functional, interdisciplinary, and diverse your teams must be. And so technology, design, support, marketing, sales, operations, the more of this cross-functional, interdisciplinary way of tackling uncertainty becomes more vital, because that's, if we're all just putting together like-minded people, then the solutions that they come up with are all going to be like-minded. And so the more uncertainty there is, the more we need sort of the going big and looking as broadly as possible, and then having the discipline to narrow and test and experiment and do empathy work to try to figure out where the fit is. Over on the more execution side of the house, where more is known, then you sort of need less of the cross functionality or the interdisciplinary, but you have to be cognizant of the uncertainty. So you have to have an increased self-awareness, and you have to learn some of these softer skills of admitting when you don't know, and being able to recognize when and admit when failure happens, hopefully failure on a small degree, and to bring in the different functions or the different disciplines that you need in order to overcome that uncertainty. And so structurally, that means that it's very agile, right? I mean, so that a team itself needs to be able to be empowered to, sort of in a classic agile, in the guise of the Agile Manifesto anyway, not thinking about any implementation of agile, but self-organized, autonomous, and able to decide how best to accomplish a mission is up to the team, which means that they need access to resources such that if they face uncertainty that they don't have the capabilities there, they can bring in the right team members that help them solve for that particular uncertainty. And if they don't need it, then they don't have to, right? But so the work itself and the knowledge of the deep knowledge of the problems and the needs and the deep understanding of ways to solve it is all generated by those agile teams. And that's true on the very execution side of the house, but it's also very true on the very uncertain side of the house. So to me, that's sort of this basic structure now. And I call it, team is the new unit of work. So rather than focusing on the individual, and of course, an individual is still important, but the individual belongs to a social structure, which is the agile team, that is empowered and held accountable to solving their mission. And so it's that unit that ends up being able to navigate the uncertainty. And what that does is frees up all of this middle management so that they can then allocate resources really on the fly based upon changing priorities or changes in the outside world, or, these other elements that they need to be able to on the fly manage the missions and how missions are going to be accomplished and how those missions roll up to the group level. And they own this larger context of how all of this agile layer below them contributes to the divisional or group mission. And so you start seeing a hierarchy of teams that goes up to the company priorities and the company needs, so that you can draw a straight line between the work that an agile team is doing and what the output of the company should be. And this is actually revolutionary. The existing way of managing is that we hope that a team that writes 1 million lines of code will have a positive impact on the company. But that's hope. You can't draw a straight line. Who knows? Maybe maybe it's 100 monkeys that write 1 million lines of code and you don't get anything out of it. And so this structure, bottoms up, agile, with cascading missions up to the corporate objectives, actually maybe gets us to a point where the very work that the ground level does in direct response to needs is how these organizations can become more resilient to all of this uncertainty and endless disruptions.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, this move from the individual as kind of the defining unit to the team in an agile world, in a digital world where things move so fast, where you have to be agile, where you have to have, as you said, kind of not uniform thinking in order to truly succeed. You have to have people with different different expertise on the team, people with different mindsets from different backgrounds, so that they can truly innovate in the proper sense of the word. And man, I just feel like every point you make, like another piece of the global puzzle uncovers in my mind. So really super insightful talk already. I'm loving it.
Well, thank you. You're too kind. I think that the key is that, there's a lean turn from lean manufacturing, the Toyota production system, Genshi Genbutsu, which is go to the source. And the idea is that an distributed agile team is close to the need, it's close to the problem, and also has the ability of finding the solution. And so that makes, just in this complex world, makes a heck of a lot more sense than the old school way, which is hierarchical, that the understanding of the problem and the solution is generated top down rather than ground up.
Yeah, another good point. And another thing that I thought of earlier when you were talking about the kind of skills that people need in order to thrive in this information age. I'll just put it like that, because we are living in the information age. And it seems to me like this is the main reason why we're also seeing this shift from a focus on hard skills to soft skills, right? Because hard skills, with everything at your disposal, with every learning resource at your fingertips, like literally your keyboard, it's much harder to acquire these soft skills. And so I think this is why this will be the primary kind of competitive advantage in the years to come.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we already see that on the leadership side, right? I mean, so I've run into, and talked to lots of leaders that are getting, sort of these new skill developments around vulnerability and empathy and empowerment and self-awareness and all those type of things. My favorite is Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, which just, sort of really nails that. And then I do think that in different elements of the ground level, we also see that. And so, a little bit of democratization around design thinking. I mean, it's almost a buzzword. Boy, there's a whole, I don't remember what car it is. There's a whole car commercial series now where all of they're all talking about empathy, which just kind of cracks me up. That the fact that empathy is a corporate buzzword is amazing to me. And at some level, though, maybe it diminishes it a little bit. Even if they do empathy wrong, the fact that they're trying is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Now I actually want to return to something that we started talking about earlier, but maybe I want to dedicate a little bit more time to it. And you probably already know what I'm talking about. So, the COVID pandemic has had a huge impact on how we treat the digital, if that's the right way of putting it. So how do you think that this trend will continue? How do you think that digitalization will evolve as we move out of the pandemic? And do you think that this distinction between just digitalization and digital transformation will become more prominent, or will it become diminished as we embrace the digital more and more?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question. The same time that we're seeing all of this embracing of the digitization, we're seeing here in the US, some antitrust action taken against big tech. There's certainly a lot of backlash on privacy, and even more than privacy, sort of the manipulation of human beings by technology. And by manipulation, I mean that, we're just trying, a lot of these companies are just trying to increase engagement using whatever methodologies that they want, ethics aside, right? There's no sort of ethical standards being applied. And so we're seeing some pushback there. So I think that, it's a big question to me whether we are able to strike a balance and find, again, I alluded to it earlier, sort of this more humanistic approach to technology. And so rather than, just pretending that technology itself is the end all and is going to cure all and all of these type of things, it's really about the application and us keeping our human side. And how do we build ethics into the digitization? How do we build ethics into the digital transformation? And I think I cover that a little bit in my book too. I mean, I think it's, in my view, in an agile world, again, sort of agile with a small a, the team structure, the team as the new unit of work is a way for us to add the ethical part of it, because when you're defining a mission for a team, you can set the boundaries, you can set the guardrails right there as part of the mission, such that those team members, they've helped establish that, so they're bought into it, and then the team members will hold each other accountable to that. And so that's actually how you drive culture change to be more ethical, is when from the ground up, the behavior is within these values guardrails. And if we're in an agile organization and we're already setting this mission, then it's really not that big of a leap to start adding these boundaries and these value statements into the mission. And in that way, I'm hoping, if people bought into this, that we can start bringing in this more humanistic side to technology, to digitization.
So basically, we shouldn't view technology or the digital as the positive change, but we should view it as something that can enable us to make positive change.
Yeah, that's well said. I think so. There's a chart in my book where I put Moore's law on the exponential growth of power of transistors, and I overlay on top of that wealth disparity, and it tracks, right? And it doesn't mean there's causation there, but but you can draw some inferences that technology has not cured our economic inequity, right? It's actually getting worse as well. And so I think that for a lot of us, I've always been a tech startup guy, and I think for a lot of us, the promise of capitalism, of technology, of computerization, of digitization has been that we can create a better world. But we need to ask the question now, are we creating a better world for a few of us, or are we going to create a better world for a majority of us, for all of us, for as many people as possible? And I think that if it's the latter, which is certainly where my heart is, then we have to take some steps to make sure that happens. We can't just be passive about it. We actually have to actively alter the system itself so that the output of the system is a more equitable world.
Mic drop. Those were some super strong points there. Awesome. That does it for my questions. Just before we finish, the book that you mentioned, this is the book that's coming out in September, Disruption, right?
Right. So it's actually now October, but the book is called Disruption Proof. Okay. And it's available for pre-order at your favorite retailers, but also on my website, brantcooper.com. I've got some other bundles there. So it's a way for you to get the book plus a little bit more. And so people should hit me up on brantcooper.com if they're interested in that. Yeah. And so, anticipating your next question, I mean, I'd love to hear from people about what they think about this, and they can join the conversation. I've got a Slack channel that they can join. If you go to brantcooper.com, you can see an invite for that. I'm Brant Cooper on all social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and all the rest. So, I encourage people to reach out. Brant@brantcooper.com is my email address. And, I try to respond to everybody. So I really hope that those people out there that want to be part of this change, of taking this action, will join the conversation.
I can definitely vouch for Brant that he's very good with responding. So you can take your word for that. And Brant, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm really glad we got to speak about such an important and interesting topic. It's been both very insightful and a real pleasure. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.